Today we're going to talk about quadratic functions, quadratic equations, and solving them. So quadratic function is when you have the basic y equals ax squared plus bx plus c. This is what you guys have been talking about. You've been graphing them, all that good stuff. A quadratic equation, though, is where instead of y equals, we're going to put 0 equals ax squared plus bx plus c. So here's the idea. If you think about the xy axis, we're turning y into 0. And so what's happening if y is 0, we're somewhere on the x-axis. So we're looking at x-intercepts. So the idea is when you're solving this equation right here, where y equals 0, you're actually finding the x-intercepts. Also, when it's in this form, it's called standard form. So if you're ever asked to put something in standard form, you're asked to put it so 0 equals and get everything to one side so that it equals 0. And that would be standard form. Alright, so let's look at what might happen. So basically you get an equation that you're supposed to solve. For instance, if I gave you 3x plus 2 equals 14. Okay, so you're solving this. Now, this should be pretty easy. This is linear. So we subtract 2 from both sides. 3x equals 12. Divide by 3. X equals 4. Alright, pretty simple to do that. Let's go to a new page. And on this new page, let's solve this one. X squared plus 3x minus 18 equals 0. Now typically if I was doing this in class, I would say, okay, people give me ideas, and here's some of the ideas people give me. So we say, oh, let's add 18 to both sides. So we get x squared plus 3x equals 18. And then I say, okay, now what do you guys want to do? And one suggestion is typically, let's divide everything by 3. So let's do that. We can divide everything by 3. This actually gets to be pretty messy because I have x squared over 3 plus x equals 6. And then people say, hey, you want to get rid of the squared, x squared, so let's square root everything. So then if we do that legally, we have to square root everything, although I just kind of did that badly because that's not doing that for me. I'm supposed to square root the whole side, and then what is the square root of all these things? It looks a little messy. So then the next point we want to make is, alright, let's look at something a little bit different. If I told you that a times b equals 0, well then you're going to know one of two things. See, if these two things being multiplied equals 0, there's only one way you can get 0. And that's this awesome rule. 0 times anything equals 0. But that's the only way you're going to get 0. If 0 times anything equals 0, the only way you get 0 is if one of them is 0. So if I know that a times b, equals 0, then I know either a equals 0 or b equals 0 or both. And so we're going to use that to our advantage. See, if I go back to that x squared plus 3x minus 18 equals 0. If I go back to that, and I do what we've been doing in our past, where we've been taking that and we've been boxing it out and getting a double bubble. So I have x squared and minus 18, and I have x, and let's see here. 18 is 3 and 6, but those can actually go together to give you 3x. So I have 6x here and 3x here, and if 3 is negative, then it becomes a positive 3x, which is what I want. So I can replace this whole thing right here with x minus 3 and x plus 6 being multiplied. And those still equal 0. Now think about it, you guys. If I go back here and say, oh, if I have these two things and multiply them, I get 0, then either a equals 0 or b equals 0. Well, look at this. I have something times something else. I have my a and my b. So what I'm saying is one or both of these have to equal 0 for this whole thing to equal 0. So either x minus 3 equals 0 or x plus 6 equals 0. And if that's true, I'm going to add 3 to both sides, and I know that x equals 3. And I'm going to subtract 6 from both sides, and I know that x equals negative 6. And so here is how I can find out what is x. How can I solve for x? Notice I get two answers. I get 3 and negative 6. Now you don't have to typically do this part, but I just want to show you. If I were to take and plug in 3 to this equation for x, I get 3 squared plus 3 times 3 minus 18. 3 squared is 9, plus 3 times 3 is 9, minus 18. 9 plus 9 is 18. 18 minus 18 equals 0. It works out. If I do that with the negative 6, so if I take that negative 6 and plug it in, I get negative 6 squared plus 3 times negative 6 minus 18. Negative 6 squared is 36 minus 18 minus 18. Did you know 18 and 18 make 36? So when I subtract 18 twice, I'm going to get 0. And so that one also works. So I get two answers. I get 3 and I get negative 6 for an answer. All because if I go back and because I took this whole thing and I double bubbled it into x minus 3 and x plus 6, I can take each of those bubbles, set them equal to 0, and solve, and that'll give me my two answers. So let's look at a couple more examples here before I set you free. So we have 2x squared minus 17x plus 45 equals 3x minus 5. Alright, so remember when I talked about that when we have to put things in standard form, this is one of those places where you have to put this in standard form. I need to get it so it's equal to 0. So I move everything to one side. I'm going to take everything from the right, move it to the left. So minus 3x, add 5. So now I get 2x squared minus 20x plus 50 equals 0. I have to point out, you guys, these are big numbers. I really don't want to double bubble these. But if you notice, each and every one of them can be divided by 2, which means I can take out a 2. So I take a 2 out. And when I do that, it's like I'm dividing by 2. So 2x squared divided by 2 is just x squared, minus 20x divided by 2 is 10x, plus 50 divided by 2 is 25, equals 0. So now I still have a 2, but what's going to happen is I'm going to take this whole thing and I'm going to box it out. I'm going to double bubble. Most people in the world call it factor. And put an x squared there and a plus 25 there. So we've got x and x. And if I make them both negative 5, that means I will get negative 5x and negative 5x, and those add up to the negative 10x I'm looking for. So I'm going to replace this bubble right here with x minus 5 and then another x minus 5 equals 0. So now each of these things are going to equal 0. Now remember when I said that a times b equals 0? Well, what if I said that a times b times c equals 0? Then one of those or all of those have to be 0. Now I say that because if you'll notice, I have 2, I have a bubble, and I have a bubble. So we can look at each of these being 0. 2 equals 0, x minus 5 equals 0, and x minus 5 equals 0. Now, some of you may have already been wondering about this, but 2 doesn't equal 0. It never equals 0. So we can actually just discount that and ignore it. Even though the 2 is there, it really doesn't affect our answer. But then for these other ones, I need to add 5 to both sides. So I get x equals 5. Then over here, I add 5 to both sides, and I get x equals 5 again. So on this one, even though I got 2 answers, I really only got one, and that is x equals 5. But you can just go ahead and circle both of them and just tell me, x equals 5 and x equals 5. Alright, so that's kind of the whole thing in a nutshell. I'm going to do a couple more examples though, just so you get to do this. Alright, so this next one is 9p squared minus 12p plus 4 equals 0. Okay, this is already equal to 0, so I can go ahead and just box out that 9p squared. So I got 9p squared and 4 here. So I've got 3p and 3p. I'm hoping it works out to do 3p. Otherwise I could do 9p and 1p. But let's see here. I'll put a 2 and a 2 there. And what does that give me? That gives me 6p here and 6p here. I'm trying to get negative 12p. So if those are both negative, and negative 2 times negative 2 is a positive 4, so it works out. So I've got 3p minus 2 times 3p minus 2 equals 0. And I take each of those and set it equal to 0. Okay. And now I need to add 2 to both sides. So I get 3p equals 2. Divide by 3, p equals 2/3. Same thing over here. I'm adding 2 to both sides. So 3p equals 2. Divide by 3. So then p equals 2/3 twice. So again, I'm getting the same answer. This isn't always going to happen, but once in a while it does happen. You get the same answer. And it's also going to happen that you get fractions. So p equals 2/3. Alright, I need a new color here. How about this one? 3x minus 6 equals x squared minus 10. So this one again needs to be put in standard form. I'm going to put x squared though. I'm going to keep it where it is because I usually like to keep x squared being positive. So I have to subtract 3x from both sides. There's no x on this side, so I'll just put it out there. Add 6. So then I get 0 equals x squared minus 3x minus 4. So we go ahead and box this one out. Get x squared minus 4x and x. And let's see, it's going to be 4 and 1, I believe. And this gives me 4x and 1x. I need it to be a negative 3, so 4 needs to be negative. So now I can rewrite it. Instead of x squared minus 3x minus 4, I'm going to write my double bubble x minus 4 times x plus 1. Set each one equal to 0. And we get x equals 4 and x equals negative 1. And there's my two answers. Okay, I have one more example, and this one is actually a little bit different, so I want to make sure that I go over it with you. So then we'll be done. So the problem is 2w squared minus 10w equals 23w. Oops, let me erase that here. Alright, so 23w minus w squared. So again, I want to get everything to one side. Add w squared, subtract 23w. So those all cancel out, equals 0 on that side. Let's see here, I get 3w squared minus 33w. So the thing I want to point out is this no longer has three terms. This is just the w squared and the w. And so when this happens, we're not really going to box out. What we're going to look at is there anything I can take out for numbers and letters, just take out, factor out, to make this easier for me. And you'll see that they both have a 3 in, so I can factor out a 3. And they both have a w, so I'm going to factor out a w. So what's left in this first one, if I divide by 3w, is just a w left, minus this one, 33 divided by 3 is 11, and then the w's will cancel out. And so what's nice about this is I still have my a and my b. I still have two things being multiplied to give me 0, and so I just have to write that down, 3w equals 0, and w minus 11 equals 0, and solve each one. Divide by 3, w equals 0. Add 11. W equals 11. And there's my two answers. Okay, so again, if you don't have the three terms that we're used to, we only have two terms, see if you can take something out. And that something counts as a bubble. We could even put parentheses around it to make it look like a bubble if that makes you feel better.